Okay, so we made our program run and we decided only 4 marks because it's going to take too long to enter the marks. In the instruction though it says, let's go write code for the test total button to give the user the maximum mark for the test. Now this is a different button totally. It's not the same button, obviously, it's test total, so we want to get the mark that the test is out of, and we're going to use it in another button. So guess what kind of variable it must be? Global, yes, because we have to use it elsewhere. So I'm going to call it I total colon integer. Actually, I test total, just to be more, because it's not a totaling variable, it's just the test total. And we're going to ask the user to enter I test total colon equals. Now, if it's an integer, we have to convert it to an integer from a string if we're going to use the input box. So in your button click event for test total, you're going to say our test total equals. Now, if I put input box statement here, enter the total mark. Okay, in simple input box statement, but the problem is what's on the left hand side is an integer, on the right hand side it's a string, so we have to do string to int open brackets and close brackets at the end there. So we have to do string to int because an integer is on the left, a string is on the right, so we have to convert. Take note, we're not checking to see if this is a string or not, are we? Well, we're going to use a loop later on, a different loop, a repeat loop, to do this. Should I do it now? Guys? Let's do a repeat now because we are brave. Repeat until. Our code is equal to 0. So we're going to have a repeat loop going here, and we'll have a different variable. We'll keep our test total right till the end. We will not do a string to int conversion because we're going to get a string from our input box and we're going to check that string each time. So I'll call it S mark colon equals. And of course I'm going to have to declare that variable too as a string. After we have got S mark from the input box, we're going to val it. Val, in other words, make sure that we can convert S mark from a string to an integer. Now hands up, I'm sure you remember this. So to val, we'll take a string and then it's going to be the processor will try and convert it to an integer. And if it can be converted to an integer, then our code will be 0. And if it can't be, then guess what? This process is going to repeat itself over again. Now make sure to include things like this in your pat. Of course we have to declare our val parameters. We call these things in brackets parameters. There's 1, 2, 3 parameters in the val procedure. Val is a procedure because we write it without any assignment statement. The procedure is not written in brackets. Input box is a function. It's called on the right hand side of the equal sign. Val is a procedure. Now, this will happen until these two lines of code will definitely happen at least once. Why? Because our checking is only happening after the lines of code have happened. So this is called a post-test loop. It's a post-test. Basically, we do the code and then we check. And so therefore this repeat loop will happen at least once. There'll be one chance at least to get it right. And if it doesn't get right, then the input box will come up again and it'll repeat again and again until our code is naught. Remember, our code will turn a value of naught if S mark can be converted into I num. After all that process is finished, you can safely have the following. I test total colon equals string to int S mark. Yes, I'm fine. I just get a scratchy throat when I talk. Right, so there we have it. So we got our R test total. It's a global variable. We've made sure that that number is going to be an integer when we convert it from a string without any issues. Let's go to our other code, the capture button. We have this here too, don't we? We have this process where we actually asking the user to enter a mark and then we add it straight to our list box. What if that item is not an integer? What if it's not correct? Well, guess what? We're gonna modify this for loop into a repeat loop. How do you feel about that? We're going to modify the for loop into repeat loop. So we're going to delete that part. Then we are going to say repeat. But this time we're going to repeat until k is equal to 4. Remember we used to have a for loop of for k equals 1 to 4. Remember we had for k equals 1 to 4. Now instead of that, we're going to set k to naught. And inside our for loop, we'll increment k each time and continue until k is equal to 4. That's just another way of writing your for loop. If you know something's going to happen at least once. If you don't want to use a for loop, you can do the following. You set our for loop counter to naught. Increment k inside the loop, and in our condition, stop the loop when we hit k equals 4. But now we've got to enter marks. So guess what? We're going to have another repeat loop. And the same thing. We have to val the mark that we are entering. Val S mark, comma I num I code, just like in our previous one, until our code equals naught. And then we have to declare our num and our code in our variables over here. So check that out. We have a repeat loop inside a repeat loop. Nested loops, loops within loops. We know we want four boxes, and by the way, we could have kept this outside repeat loop as a for loop. Didn't have to use repeat until, this part. I can actually change that back, but I'm going to let you type it out first so you get the idea. Take note of happening over here. What's happening here? We're adding a mark to the list box. I actually want you to actually use this method so that you can get used to it. So, loop within a loop. If you had to highlight things like this, can you see that's one loop? Okay? It's inside this repeat loop. Can you see that? We also have, so if we had to take this away, we'd have repeat increment k, list box items dot add until k equals 4. All right? If you highlight the stuff inside here, you'll see that's inside this repeat loop. Now, just to change it up a bit, I'm actually going to go back to our for loop, and I'll show you can do this. We didn't actually have to have a repeat loop here, where you repeat increment k until k equals 4. You didn't have to. We could have begin and end, and take note how repeat does not have a begin and end. I can replace that with a for k equals 1 to 4 do begin and end. And then inside that for loop we have another repeat loop which is going to test each number, all four of them in the case of this particular activity, because we're doing 4 things. We could have 1 to 24, but we don't want to be spending all day typing in marks. So you can change it back to a for loop if you want, and then you'll notice that this is all inside the for loop, and inside the repeat loop we are repeating, entering a mark all the time until we know that the mark is correct. The inside repeat loop is only to check to see if the mark is correct before it stops. It's basically displaying the input box again and again. If the person keeps making a mistake, this inside repeat loop will display the input box again and again until the user has typed in the right number that can be converted to an integer. Then we take that number as a string, mind you, because the list box only can display strings. You'll take it as a string and put it in the list box. So if you were to take this repeat loop out, our for loop would only have listbox items.add smark. But in order to get smark, we had to use an input box statement, but we also had to make sure that input box is going to give us the correct answer. Right, so that will be that.